My name is Phil Koshi. I'm one of the co-facilitators with our Samhaj group here in North Jersey. And I have the distinct honor of introducing Dr. Priyanka Upadhyay. Got it.
Well done. Clap it up for that.
So I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to read her little bio. So she is a licensed clinical psychologist who has experience in providing psychotherapy and educational workshops to individuals, groups, and families with young adults with mental illness. So Dr. Upadhyay also provides psychotherapy and consultation to individuals and families interested but unclear about the role of mental health in overall well-being and health. She currently works at NYU Langone Medical Center Bellevue Hospital based program teaching, NYU Langone Medical Center Bellevue Hospital based program treating survivors of the 9/11 attacks while maintaining her keen interest in South Asian mental health. And on a personal note, I'd like to say that I got to meet you once before at a Samhaj potluck in December. And just from that one experience, I walked away with an impression of how kind, compassionate, knowledgeable, and dedicated to the South Asian community she is. So I'm very happy that she's back with us once again, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. So thank you.
You know, the stodgy podiums don't work for me. But I'm going to have to go back and forth to move the slides. Thank you for that very generous introduction. You know, I've known Aruna for I think close to a decade. We're old. Yes, a decade. I've known Aruna for a decade, and I haven't done one of these workshops in a while. So it's a pleasure being back. And you know, being a parent, it's like Arya Par. Once you're a parent for life. But if you're not a parent, you could still be a parent. Interesting how that works, which is sort of why I got into psychology. It's something that I feel very passionate about. I sort of live and breathe it. I was joking with a few people when somebody asks me, so what do you do for a living? I have to think twice and say, I'm a doctor. Ah, really, you're a doctor? What kind of medicine do you practice? I was like, no, I'm a PhD doctor. And then it sort of goes to like, you know, I'm a psychologist. And often the notion is when you go to a psychologist, when you talk to a psychologist, somehow you're completely transparent. Where I can read your mind, I know you better than you know yourself. And the reason that's important to say up front is because I stand here really, I think, as a subject matter expert on how human psychology and how health impacts young people we have in our home, impacts ourselves, impacts who we are as Indians. Whether we identify as being Asian or Indian American or American, but from India, you know, or from sort of South Asia. You know, all of these sort of labels impact sort of who we are. So I just sort of want to say that there is a lot of collective wisdom in this room. I have to credit all of you for being amazing parents, even though there are days your team will make you think otherwise, but that is their job. It is their job to be able to tell you at what you suck at. That is how they learn to be adults, distinguishing between what's right, what's wrong, what will fly, and what will not fly. Does that make sense? What will fly? Yeah. Okay. So I really want to give the parents in the room the credit. It's hard doing the job because you get no training. You come from your family of origin, learning to become a parent while you have the best gift that comes into your family. You know, somebody told me the other day, I said, you know, what's it like to sort of do this parenting? This person has 5 children. So this person said to me, listen, when I had my first child, when I got married, I said, you know, this is great. I love marriage. And I was like, really? Okay. Then they had their first child and they said, you know, it felt great. And then I had the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And I was like, wait, you're still standing. Like after 5 children. That's awesome. So then they said, yeah, you know, and then I sort of felt like, there are only 2 things that can happen. One of 2 things. One, either you're married to the best gift in your life or you gave birth to it. But that only happens until your kid hits 13. That gift boy, is it a gift. And we have 2 teens in this room, and we got to hear from both of them. So you might be volunteered. This is going to hopefully be fun, even though parenting is very stressful, and it is a big job, and you don't get training for it, and you learn on the job, and you guys do your best every day. So do your young people. So I want to acknowledge both parties because, parenting isn't like how it used to be. Are most of you from India? Yeah, okay. Urban, semi-urban? Yeah, okay. So, you come from the developing world to a developed nation, and then you think like, I have all of these legacies I bring from rich Indian culture. And then you get transplanted here, and you say, geez, now what? My kid doesn't talk like me. My kid doesn't say schedule. He or she says schedule. It sort of starts there, right? It's sort of like that song, I say tomatoes, you say tomatoes. It's that kind of thing. So that's where the interesting times begin. So I definitely want to give credit to just the process of parenting in this country as well. It's a hard job. Having said that, let me get a sense of what brought you here today. It's a nice Sunday, kind of raining, gray, but what brought you here really?
My wife.
That is an honest man right now. Awesome. What did she say to you? How did she volunteer you to do this?
I came because we have a teenager, and obviously we do want to learn and see what we can do better. And that's what brings us here.
Overachieving parents. Anybody else? Anybody else want to venture as to why they're here? Yeah.
I have 2 teens, 2 boys.
Uh-huh.
A 13 who's more like a 21, a 16 who's more like a 18, I would say. So just trying to understand how to balance the 2 of them, because the 3 grades apart, but they are competitive. The younger one especially overshadows the older one, and you're like an umpire sometimes, you're like a ref sometimes. You're like,
Sure.
you kill yourself sometimes, and then sometimes you're like, don't come to me until I see blood. So I just want to make sure
That's
I'm really
perfect. You have padded walls, that's it. They'll grow up themselves.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody here more concerned about their teenager? I know that takes courage to say yes to or even raise your hand for. But that's important too, because parenting today, I was just talking to somebody offline, and we were sort of discussing how the information highway has changed the game for everyone. Parents and kids alike are sort of addicted to anything that's electronic. As a parent, I would hate to admit that, but my 8-year-old told me, Mom, you're addicted to WhatsApp like it's Clash Royale. He's addicted to Clash Royale. He said, I'm addicted to WhatsApp because it's my Clash Royale. Now that's an 8-year-old going on 15. I was not ready for that. But it's a good reminder that, it's a good reminder of many things, but it's a good reminder that we are bombarded with information. We're bombarded with stimulation. So parenting in the age of the information highway makes it challenging, because the relationship between you guys and your kids is truly a gift. And it's truly a gift that's based out of love, that needs to come from love, but that needs to come with those psychological, emotional padded walls. For our kids to fight with each other, for our kids to roll their eyes back and sort of look at us and say, you don't know anything, I know everything. For us to be able to offer that kind of structure to our kids. Yes?
I just want to add to your
Yes,
question.
please.
I'm here because, one, it's not easy to parent today.
Yes.
Especially we as immigrants work harder, we expect higher, and we are surrounded by a community who's achieving, overachieving, and pressures transferred to our kids. How do you stop the pressure being pushed onto your child before it goes too far? That's one. 2, our kids look different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about whether other kids face it or not, but my daughter is sensitive. She goes to the local middle school, and they as a community stick together. There is no assimilation of whites and browns, and I'm going to be pretty much open about the way
We're
I say
all
it.
brown here,
Yes.
at least on the
So
outside.
I see that the alienation there, and the struggle that she and other friends have in they feel lesser than they should just because of the way they look or the color of their skin.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know, so it's an everyday thing. It's not something you can get over, so just talk. By talk.
I don't think it is something to get over because I think we live in a state in this country and we live in times in this country politically, but we also live in times where we culturally and generationally are just constantly dealing with diversity. So, you know, it's just sort of the flip end of what you're saying is can we, what I would say in response to that is can we sort of shift how we see ourselves, our role as parents, as role as people in the times that we live today, as learning to embrace diversity more. But that means we ourselves will have to embrace diversity. If you think of, and this is not a judgment, but if you think of how many friends you have from a diverse background, and if you come up with one, that's where the work starts. Because it's hard to teach a young person who's looking up to you. I mean, they are. I mean, really, I know it's hard to believe, but they are. They're looking up to you to sort of say, hey, how are mom or dad or mom and dad navigating these challenges, which clearly they face, you know, the school system here, but the school system, I think, across the country, and maybe now across the world, is getting more, you know, they're getting more diverse. So you're sitting alongside with a Chinese kid, you're sitting alongside with an African American kid, a kid who's from Europe, who's here as an expat kid. I mean, you can't get away from diversity, but it's also hard to embrace diversity, right? So one of sort of the challenges really, you know, of being sort of a parent, but also being a teen, is there are challenges from within. As parents, we experience challenges from within. I come from Bombay, you know, I grew up in sort of a very diverse background myself. My parents had a lot of Western friends, immigrant friends from Africa. So when I went to school, they would say, so are you Hindu? Are you a Brahmin? And I would say, I'm Indian. And my dad would say, you know, just go tell them you're Indian. And when I went to school, they said, what do you mean you're Indian? I said, you don't believe me? I'm Indian, really. I look Indian, right? But we're used to categorizing people, and we need to categorize people. When you're an immigrant in this country, especially maybe the parents' generation, you might feel more like an immigrant. But if we ask the young people here, whether you're an immigrant or not, we might get a very different response, right? Some of them might be a little more confused, some of them might be a little more sure. I think most of them will decide what to say when and in front of whom. But that just sort of means it's harder to get how this next generation that is not from another country who's immigrated here truly does see themselves. So that's sort of, you've sort of gone a little ahead, but that's definitely something to consider. And you know, my goal for today is sort of, you know, if you could learn parenting in an hour, this would be the biggest dishonor to each one of us in the room. It's impossible. So I hope none of you have those grandiose expectations of me or yourself, because it ain't happening, okay? But my goal today is just sort of to begin a conversation and to create and to begin creating a culture of parenting young people who are actually emerging adults. And I think that's a nice frame to keep in mind. They're emerging adults. They may not feel like adults. Sometimes your 13-year-old may act like an 8-year-old, you know. That's hard to deal with because you're telling that 13-year-old, listen, you're 13, you should be acting your age. But these emerging adults will go back and forth until they can come to a point where they've got enough internal sort of templates and blueprints of how to handle different situations to then become an adult. And that's where sort of the culture of parenting comes in. So I'm going to talk about 3 core philosophies. And what I'd like to do is, you know, if the 2 teens in here are comfortable, there's no pressure, you don't have to do anything, is sort of just build a little bit of empathy. There is a lot of empathy in this room. You guys are doing, I'm sure, a great job. But sort of just hear from what the teenage world feels like. And then as parents, what you feel like. So we can pick a topic, and what we can. Would you guys feel comfortable doing that? Sure. Yeah. Yes. We all can chime in. Nobody has to come up front. Okay. There's no pressure, but if you want it, Do you guys want to come in front or do you want to sit where you are? Okay, all right. So, what I was thinking of doing is just to sort of begin this presentation by getting a sense of where the two perspectives either can meet, do meet, and exist within a relationship. So, we can pick a topic. It can be anything. It can be curfew, though that might be touchy. We can pick how much internet time, or how much iPhone, Snapchat. I see nods. What are we doing? Snapchat is a controversial one. Let's do something a little more kosher. Huh?
General data usage of the phone.
That is spoken like a scientist. Okay, general data usage on a phone, which could include Snapchat, it could include science project, Instagram,
Homework.
homework.
There's no homework.
See, now that.
I don't think so. Not homework.
There's YouTube's.
Yeah, not homework. All right.
YouTube's.
See, but I don't know how many of your teens are just dying to spend 3 hours on the computer researching homework. There are some
It
teens.
depends on the age of the child. If
Yes.
High school kids, they do a lot of
Well,
work
yeah, I
on
mean, they
that.
got it. That's just survival, right? Okay, so let's pick something where there's usually conflict. Yeah.
Mine's not related to screens, but the thing I struggle with is with my son. He's 13, and we kind of try to make everything work, and we try to talk things out. But I feel like somewhere along the way, I get into that mom nagging mode
Okay.
without being able to help it. And
Yeah.
then, like recently, I don't know, something happened, and he was basically telling me that. Oh, it was something about boys. So yeah, he's not here, thankfully. So he was wearing the same clothes.
You strategically did not bring him.
Yeah. Well, it said 15 and above, so that's.
Oh, yes, right,
Yeah,
right.
I should have brought him. But anyway, same clothes, same two for 2 days, and I'm like, trying to, and I didn't want to lecture him about it, so I said, listen, how can I say this to you
Yeah.
in a nice way so that we don't get into that argument mode? It was
Yeah.
early in the morning, and I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't
Uh-huh.
want to get in an argument. I said, I asked him, I said, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And invariably, it ended up in an argument. It was like a 5-minute car ride to his school. And then I said to him, if your teacher, said something about a homework not done or something like that, there would be a consequence, right? So I'm just telling you, I don't want to give you a consequence, but can we fix this behavior going forward so I don't have to get them? Because my teacher never made me feel like a horrible person who did everything wrong. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh,
And I was
yes,
like, what
that's
did I
a
do
jab
today?
to the heart, right?
But I don't want him to feel that way about me. So I want to change that, and I'm willing to, learn and do what I need to
Yeah.
make it better. So
Yeah.
that's why.
I would have just told your son, listen, I'm okay if you wear your clothes as long as you don't stink. The moment you find people who go away from you, who walk away from you,
Don't care.
So adding to that,
He doesn't
right,
care.
I think this, and I have a teenager, almost teenager girl, and I think when they're 12 and 13, hormones really pick up, and it's so difficult to talk to her.
Absolutely.
And I want to understand how to deal with no. Anything I tell her, she'll do opposite. So
and you're not having fun?
I am not taking a glass of wine, but it's not.
Oh, self-medicating,
I'm
folks.
self-medicating myself, but if we can stop this 3 steps before, then arguing and explaining, she's not listening, it's already the doors are closed. I
Okay,
can
so
see that.
let's
That's
do
what-
this. Let's archive these thoughts because I want to go through 3 core principles. You all do them, okay? What we want to do is we want to combine all 3. But what we also want to do is we want to have and retain a sense of humor. Okay? That's very hard to do when your kid is testing you. But let's hear from what the kid wants. Let's hear where they're coming from too. It's a different age of parenting, folks. Probably most of us grew up with our parents saying, you better do this because I told you to do so, right? And you either did it or, a solution I love and I still see happening is, yes, absolutely I will do it. And then you go out and do exactly the opposite, but you don't let your parents know you did that. Right? So I remember in college, we had in Bombay, I used to go to Xavier's College, I don't know if anybody knows, and the Jesuits said, no skirts 6 inches above the knees, and we said, yes, Padre. You know what we did?
5.5.
Yeah.
We had socks up to here. We were
No, exactly what we did. So that's the middle ground. But why does that happen? Because it's this sense of like, I don't see a good reason in your argument for me to, like not wear, a hoodie twice. I don't see a good argument. And frankly, it's irrational. It feels irrational to them, right? So let's archive these situations. But I think what I would encourage you to hold as we go through this, because both teenagers and parents bring up very strong feelings for each other, right? So let's keep the humor going and let's keep the wisdom going, because clearly there is love, even for those of you who are here because you don't even want to be. There's love somewhere in there. So let's keep the love and keep going, but let's hear from both parents and teens, right? One question.
I
and
want to
then
add one more thing. So, other than everything that everybody's been saying, which is true for most all of us, one of the things I find myself struggling with, and my husband too, is the concept of respect that we had growing up. So, like we just said, right, your parents asked you to do it, so you did it. Coincidentally, both of our families had been pretty open. They really didn't have to ground us, and tell us to do certain things. It just we went with it.
Yeah.
Certain things we didn't like, we didn't do it, but the way we responded with them was not out of fear. We genuinely had this concept of, and I say concept of respect because it's very different now.
Yeah.
So we know it's different, but when my son had been the most mature baby in the group when he was growing up, everybody was like, he talks so well, he communicates with everybody. He's 12 and a half now, and he's talking much lesser. He does still talk, but it's I can see the change in middle school, and the other complication is I have a 2-year-old. So after being a single child for 10 years, it's a lot of changes for him at the same time.
Correct.
So our major conflict is how he responds back to us.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we see that everywhere, it's particularly hard coming from him because we've seen him as a much more mellow, respectful kid before. We understand it's part of growing up, but I need someone to tell me what to think of when he talks like that. It's not that he's being disrespectful, it's just the way of life for them. This is how they talk. Or maybe we can meet halfway, I don't know.
Correct,
So
because
that's a
we've
big
trained
challenge.
you to be
Yeah.
the kind of parent that you enjoyed being. But now, you don't like the training you're getting, right? You wanted to go back to the way it was before. Like, please be that good child who listened to everything, who was obedient. Well, can I tell you it's going to get more interesting?
Oh yeah, I can see it, especially with the little one. She's my baby girl who is probably apt for this conversation.
So tools are really helpful, right? And tools you can find. What I will do at the end is I will, if you guys are on email, please sign up. If you're not, I will send a bunch of resources that I use a lot with the young adults that I work with, who might be 18 or 19 developmentally, but are emotionally still 12, 13, and 14. So feel free to sort of browse through some of those books, but also remember that our cultural background really does impact how we parent. And so one of the core sort of pillars of, I think, parenting today for all of us is really becoming more conscious of who we are. Who we are in the parenting relationship is really critical. If you're coming from the background, right? So if you're sort of coming from, let's do this. I'm going to come back to this, but I want you to have a look at this. If the legacies that you're bringing from your family are one of these types of parenting styles, and you know who you are, the combination. Okay. That's a diplomatic answer. I think your kids might feel differently. But the point of this slide really is, there's no real training to become a parent. You sort of come to the table becoming a parent based on the legacies and based on the traditions that your parents, their parents, over generations have passed on to you. Not necessarily sitting you down and saying, beta, you're going to become a mom or a dad now. This is what you need to do with your son or daughter. Here are the 10 steps. These are the 10 tips. Here's a book. Good luck. Most of us have not come to the table parenting in that particular way. So there you come to these kinds of workshops and say, hey, how can I, so far what I've heard is, how can I help fix the problem that my child is presenting to me, but more so, how can I fix the problem? Now that is often an example of helicopter parenting. As an Indian parent, I have to admit that I get into helicopter mode more often than I would like, and that too unconsciously. Why is that? Because it's sort of this culture of overdoing and overbeing. You know, we have a grandmother in this room. If we asked her, how did you raise your children? She probably said they got 2 sticks, 1 stone, and a vessel, and that's it. The whole notion of toys, the whole notion of spending time, the whole notion of relationships has changed to becoming more is more and less amounts to nothing. So the more you do and the more you're involved in and the more you succeed and the more you perform and the more you're cool, the more you're smart, the more you are as a person. But in some essence, we all know we are much more than what we do, what clothes we wear, what, you know, how we look, what houses we live in. Now this might seem idealistic to you, but you know, they do a lot of research on young adults in their 30s. And one of the things that these young adults will say, you know, when you look back, what did you take from your family? What these people take from their family is how much time did we spend together? You know, what were some fun things we did together? What were some of the, you know, sort of heartwarming things my mother or my dad or my parents or my grandparents said to me? Were there times where we did nothing and we were okay with that? So we've so gotten away from, I think, you know, 2 generations ago what parents and grandparents did, to this mode of appearing in a certain way, acting in a certain way, and constantly being on the go. You're constantly on the conveyor belt. So I invite you to sort of go back to your lives today from this talk and sort of just look at where you are overdoing and where you are overbeing. You know, as a helicopter parent or as a sort of like, you know, a drill sergeant. My husband comes from an army family. So, you know, I was sort of like, hey, you know, there's no shades of gray here. You're told to do this. You will eat whatever is on your plate. I don't care if you puke after. You will eat and not talk and not drink, you know, and it was that sort of upbringing. But that kind of upbringing, you know, I want you to tune into what you're feeling right now as I'm talking to you about this parenting. To me, it seems stifling. It seems completely sort of stifling of who the individual is. So while your son today is sort of like finding this new thing he's getting into teenagers, his hormones are really going to kick in, right? So his body is changing, his internal environment is changing, and his external environment is changing. In school, at home, with you. So there's a lot of change going on. In some sense, if we were to sort of dissect our children's brains, metaphorically of course, we'd sort of see like a huge construction zone in there. Please don't take any of this literally. Right? But it's a huge construction zone, it's messy, it's noisy, you know, it's clangy, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening, there are electrical circuits going all over the place. And you know, while I'm sort of saying this in a humorous way, there's enough science to say that the teenage brain it's a rough place to be in. What do you guys think?
So,
Yeah? Kinda? Wow. Need some spunky teens here.
can I volunteer to people who are not yet parents and who happen to be in the room and are obviously not teens? So Nitin, Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah?
Still.
It definitely
Confusion is a good state to be in because you're always in flux. If you're in flux, you're always either growing or regressing, but the possibility of growing is there too. Yeah. Anything besides confusing?
Yeah, well, I guess I want to add confusing. So I guess one was just teenager thinking you're growing up, right? So you're sorting stuff out for yourself. But 2, I also feel like being, an immigrant too. You're kind of navigating this uncharted territory because my parents moved here from India and they didn't know how stuff worked here. And so I was on the front lines of this kind of cultural exploration that they had never experienced. And so they were bringing their ideas of how family works, how school works, how school and family works, and all that kind of stuff from an Indian context, and juxtaposing it on me growing up in this American context. And so the confusion was compounded by the fact that there was a mismatch in what their expectations were and what was happening in my real life.
Yeah.
And so that led to confusion with me. And like, at the time, I didn't explain to them where this confusion was coming from. Like, I acted out.
Yeah, right.
I completely tuned them out, and I didn't take their opinion into consideration. So I felt like I immediately assumed, like, because I wasn't really asked what my opinion was. I never had a conversation about, like, what comes to a middle ground. I didn't have that. It was more like, let's do it my way, and their way wasn't working because I knew it wasn't working because I was the one going through it. So
yeah. Do you think you could, again, we have 3 generations here, right? So feel free to take the opportunity to blame your parents. It's all okay. It's all okay because we're all learning. Many generations, it takes a little bit of learning to get to the point where like, mom, you kind of didn't get that right, but it's a learning process. So Phil, would you sort of peg your parents or those types of parents into maybe one particular category where they are predominantly working from?
yeah, so actually I would say my mom is a helicopter parent. And then I would say my dad was laissez-faire. So that was another dynamic.
Oh,
that
yes, of
played
course.
a role, because we know which parent to go to for certain things.
Right.
Which parent,
Good cop and bad cop.
Yeah.
That's right? I was telling somebody about divide and rule. So what my grandmother used to do with my mother and my uncle is that because it was like, geez, like I have to manage everything in addition to these 2 kids who were being really annoying, she would try and pit them against each other. But the dad was never involved, right? My grandfather was never involved, but it was done so strategically and done so masterfully that what happened is that the siblings just sort of landed up coming together. And they was like, you know what, let's not go to mom. She's gonna just either say no or make life difficult. Let us just figure it out. Now, that's a great strategy if you have siblings, but if you don't have siblings and you're sort of one person, having these 2 very different parents to deal with, you learn to navigate those minefields, right? But that can often add to what you're dealing with as a teenager, which is raging hormones, peer pressure, now social media. I don't know whether social media was sort of as big when you were growing up. Snapchat and Instagram and who's cool and who's not cool, and it's just completely, constantly bombarded, right? Yeah. What about you? What do you think? Where do you think your parents might fit in?
Same as Phil's. Mother's helicopter, father's laissez-faire. And I will still say my mother's slowly been ramping up her helicopterness. Even now.
Well,
Yeah.
of course she is. You look like a man, you could get married, have children, have a family, buy a house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Eventually buy a Lexus. No offense to everybody who owns a Lexus, but
Yeah.
that's sort of where it's progressing to, right?
Right.
So here's my question to you, right? As growing up, did you find that most of your parents were sort of more like in the realm of being helicopter drill sergeant parents? No? So tell me, what legacies do you bring to your parenting from your family?
Laissez-faire all the way.
Laissez-faire? Yeah.
Actually, I go the opposite because
Yeah.
my father's been a drill surgeon, so I make sure I'm not that. And
Ah.
probably I'm going the extreme end. I am helicopter, no doubt. I think
Right.
we are there always.
I think that's a given, right? Culturally, we're sort of like the model minority. We have no room for failure.
Yeah, but
Success is the only option, right? Of
yeah, but I
course.
want to address Nitin and Phil and Nitin because if you guys did your work, we needn't have to be helicopter parents.
That is
Really, I'm happy not doing any of this.
Interesting.
I agree.
Okay.
I will say
This is the war
that
of the worlds now.
as I've been getting older and
Yeah.
hopefully more mature, I used to be really angry at my mother when I was growing up. We got into fights all the time. But now I'm just, she's doing her best and she's doing what she thinks is best for me. And so now I'm a lot more, I guess, okay when she becomes helicopter, and I acknowledge that, okay, she's in that mode right now. She's not doing anything to like personally anger me. So I've gotten better to deal with it. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's key, right? When you sort of fit into one of these parenting styles, what is happening, except when you're a consultant parent, is you shut down the voice of the young person. They're not able to have a voice. So they have to find other ways to have a voice. So you might find that your kids will purposely act out. You tell them, go for a shower now because we are having dinner in 15, but at the 12th minute, they're ready to go for a shower. I told you to go, you should have gone I'm going, this video is not done as yet. Can I please get 5 more minutes, right? So then it's sort of like, now you're going to sit and do the work. You're going to have to deal with the frustration. The dinner's going to be late. The kid's not going, so you're going to ramp up. They're going to ramp up too. You're mean. You're the meanest mom I ever know. Right? Just over a shower? Really? Which is exactly what I tell my son. Really, over a shower, I have gone from being a kissable mom to the worst mom ever? And sometimes that is an intervention that can really help, especially teenagers, because it sort of takes you out of the power struggle. All 3 parent styles, and laissez-faire I'm not too sure, but definitely drill sergeant and helicopter parenting, it sets up a power dynamic. And that power dynamic is actually not healthy for anyone, unless you've been used to acquiescing, agreeing to. Yeah.
So we try to be the consultant parents.
Well, you have to explain what consultant parenting means.
So I'll tell you an example. But a consultant parent turns into a drill sergeant within 5 minutes.
Yes. It's a slippery slope.
So what happens is that I tell her that you don't have to learn everything the hard way. I have been there, I know what happens, and I'll let you experience it, but don't repeat it again and again.
Yeah.
That's what happens, When she starts repeating stuff, then I become a drill sergeant.
Okay. So this is a perfect segue into this. It's 3 o'clock, but I want to keep us going on this, because mental health stats you guys will get. It'll freak you out. 1 in every 5 kids has a mental health condition. Knowing these statistics is helpful only if you're not the kind of parent who is going to go home and look for warning signs from now on. For anything. Your kid comes home dyeing their hair purple, you're saying this kid is acting out. Even though the kid gets A's and the kid is fine and socially integrated. So stats are helpful, but you can look them up, okay? What I really want to spend time on is sort of going back to these 3 core principles. But what happens is exactly, I think, what you're describing. And it's really courageous that you can talk about this, because it's sort of this slippery slope. What's happening, if you don't mind, what's happening when you're telling your child, I've been down this road, you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Try and tap into what's happening inside for you. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What concerns are you having?
So what I'm thinking is that I don't want her to learn everything the hard way.
Why
I want to
not?
give the advantage of my experience to her. That's what
Which is awesome.
Which is what I want to do basically.
Why don't you want her to make affordable mistakes?
Affordable mistakes, I agree. Yes, I will let her do affordable mistakes.
Are you
I
sure
will not.
about
No,
that?
I will not get into that. Definitely not.
Okay.
And we
Yeah.
are her parents, so we do let her have those, make those affordable mistakes. But when, as you said, when the same mistake happens again and again, that's where all this clashing again and all that stuff.
So what's the repeated mistake? What happens repeatedly?
So
So repeated mistake is that it's a very simple thing. We tell her to come down for school time at 6:45. We go out at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So you come down at 6:45, and I've been telling her that since she started driving, that if you come down at 6:45, we can leave at 6:55, so you don't need to rush to the school, drive fast, and do mistakes.
Okay.
So I've been telling her that for last probably 6 months, and I've been telling her that to come down at 6:45 for last 3 years. But 6:45 is more important now, because if she wants to drive, she has to drive safe.
Correct.
She has to give her enough time so that she doesn't make mistakes. And I sit next to her, so I know what's happening.
Maybe that's why she isn't coming down. Okay, so would you feel comfortable sort of sharing your perspective?
Well, it's kind of just hard for me to wake up in the morning. That's pretty much it. And I just come down late because I'm tired, and I go really slow in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel like driving sometimes in the morning anyway.
Clearly you guys talked about this. And this this is not to put you on the spot, but I think it's making an important point. Clearly, you driving when you're sleepy, probably pissed at mom and dad for nagging you, half-heartedly wanting to drive, but knowing that you have to get to school and have the whole day ahead. Definitely not an attractive proposition. But from your parents' perspective, it's not a safe proposition. So this doesn't feel like an affordable mistake, right? An affordable mistake is like, you're clearing the table. Your kid's clearing the table, helping you. I hope you allow your kids to do chores at home. But let's say they're helping you out with a chore, right? And they drop the plate with food. And you say, uh-oh, too bad. Can I get you some tissues to clean that up? How many of us actually do that? Awesome. Why does that work? And does it work?
It does work.
Yeah?
Because you're not blaming them for doing something wrong. They realize, when they drop it, they realize that it broke and the food is all over the place. Maybe they didn't do it intentionally. The moment you pounce on them, they won't come back to help you. But the moment you give them the tissue saying, you know what, that's okay, it happens. By the way, I'm a preschool Montessori teacher, so we do that to our preschoolers too. So we just give them the soup and the brush. We say, you know what, get a bounty. Just clean it up, that's it.
That's an affordable mistake. You can have your kid make that mistake over and over again. You just buy a new Corel set, it doesn't matter. But yes, driving unsafe, coming home later than the kid should be coming home. Wearing like clothes for like a week, and now have food and stains and mud. And with boys, I have a boy, you can't wear anything beyond one day.
Isn't that a bad habit? Like not wearing clean clothes, taking a shower every day?
That's a legacy you bring from your family. There are many cultures who don't believe that you even have to shower.
Exactly.
As long as you clean yourself, right? Exactly. See how against our culture believes that is. What do you mean? And from my family, the legacy is you have to not only brush your teeth and have a shower every day, twice a day, but you have to have a morning ablution every day. Otherwise, your system is clogged up and that's not good, right? But that's a family legacy I bring to the table. So that neuroses passes on to my son. And he was like, why? It's fine in there. Right? What if I do it every other day? But it's only when we become parents do we realize some of these templates we bring. I went through a lot of struggle. I learned the hard way. I love you so much that I don't want you to experience things the hard way. And that comes from a place of love. It truly does come from a place of love. You're not saying, you know what, what's your name by the way? Ishani. Ishani, I just don't have faith in you, honey. I just don't have faith in you to live life on your own. You're not saying that. You're saying, hey, listen, I love you. I come from this place of like you have a lot of potential in life, but let me protect you from some of these things. Let me protect you from making some mistakes that actually you could really learn from. That's one. But the second thing is, if you can allow yourselves as parents to sort of listen and say, Ishani, what's happening, my love? What happens in the morning that, for 3 years, it's been sort of hard to wake up and get down at 6:45. Can we talk about that? What might Ishani say?
It's just hard for me to wake up.
Do you think you would be able to say that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. How would it need to come across to you for you to say that?
You just have to ask me.
Okay. Does that seem doable?
Yeah, I guess as a mom, I can add to that. How we ask her.
Exactly. And how we ask and how we listen can often come from what we label as concern. We don't want our children to make mistakes because you know what? You gotta pay for mistakes. Consequences. But they are natural consequences. So, one of the things one of my mentors used to say to me when I used to work with kids is like, if the parent comes home and says, listen, this kid never is on time to school, I'm screaming and shouting and you tell the kid, hey listen, if you need to reach school at 7:30, and we need to leave at 7:10. Sweetie, I'm in the car. The car stays in the parking lot for the next 5 minutes, and then I'm leaving. Do you think your child will want to walk 3 miles or 2 miles or even 50 feet to school? New Jersey kids.
Can I share something?
Yes.
It's okay, I know it's interrupting your work, but I had the same struggle with my daughter. She's 13, and we spoon-fed all along the way. Same struggles. She's not driving, but same screaming in the morning, spoiling our day. I'm a hyper-patient person, and that totally sets a wrong tone for the day for me. For my husband, we are fighting among ourselves then the rest of the day and everything. So BJ, a friend of mine, and many of you know her, she says, okay, so why, and I said, we're screaming, then we're standing at the window to see that her bus doesn't leave. She says, why are you doing that?
Right.
And because the bus will leave. So she says, so what? I'll have to drop her. And she says, no, she doesn't go to school.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Nishka was sitting and listening to this. I have not shouted at Nishka, it's been a year. There are other things we shout about, but one battle is lesser in our home. Because she knows I'm not going to drop her. And BJ says, why would you drop her? Because I don't want her home. Because I have my life, but she says, okay, one day, don't do it.
We enable that.
Yeah.
Yes. So if in some sense your concern and your fear is coming in the way of allowing your child to make some mistakes and not pay for consequences, but learn from consequences, you're helping that construction site put a few bricks in place. Because then your child will sort of understand, like, hey, listen, I'm tired. That means I got to go to sleep earlier. Or I have to fix this tiredness so that I wake up on time, get to do what I need to do. And maybe I need to tell dad, like, Dad, you need to go easy on me when you're sitting next to me in the car. Okay, that might be another conversation. But when you can listen within the context of a relationship that's coming from love, clearly it's coming from love. Clearly it is coming from genuine concern for the best to happen with your child, for them to be the best, do the best, have the best. But if it happens only in the context of you fearing something bad will happen, you're undoing it all. You're undoing everything that you love about this person. You're undoing all the potential that you think they have. So, if let's say we rewind this conversation, right? And she comes down at 6:45. What will you say then?
Good job.
Good job.
Good
Wow.
job of the hug and a kiss, absolutely.
And Ishani, how will that feel? Because why will it feel weird?
It's just 5 minutes before the one I actually
So, it's interesting, right? Well, what does that mean? There's a difference in who you are as parents. All of your projections, all of your fears, all of your worries for her future have been enveloped in that one situation where she's 5 minutes late in the morning. Is it worth it? And if you just shifted strategy by a few degrees and said, hey, listen, what's happening? Can we help you? Because that's what you're saying, right? You're actually trying to help, aren't you? Let me help you by fixing the problem, by telling you what to do. Instead, if we just shift a few degrees and say, hey, listen, Ishani, can we work through this? Because teenagers want you to be their team member and not the dictator. You're going to push for it though. You're going to try this, you're going to go home and try it, but Ishani is going to take 3 weeks maybe to come around. So she's going to say like, wait, are they for real? Do I get the hug every time I come down at 6:45? Do I really want their hug in the morning? Do I really want their hug at all?
Ouch.
5 more minutes on Apple, like iPad.
I get 5 more minutes, right? Or, I'm joking, Ishani. Or she's going to come down and say, finally, Mom, we're working this out. They know where I'm coming from. I know where they're coming from. We're meeting midway. So Ishani can go back and say, hey, Mom, Dad, Is it okay if I come down at 6:50? Could we deal with 6:50? But it is done in the context of already what's working. What's working is that there is love in the relationship. You guys remember the scene? You guys remember the scene, right? None of us want to be in this position. But often when we can say, don't do this because I did it and look what happened to me, or I don't want you to go through what I went through, most teenagers will sort of check out, tune out, right? So if you don't take away anything from here, please take away this. Allow yourselves as parents, as adults, to come to the negotiation table. When you do it from the context of, I want to make this work for everybody, and I want to be part of the solution rather than the solution, or give the solution, or exert my power, what will have happened is you would have lost the connection. You would have lost the relationship. If you don't have a relationship with your child, doesn't matter if they're 5, 6, 3, 8, 18, 25, you're going to get nowhere. So, some very key aspects of relationships is just allow yourself to listen. You know, like adults, we know how to have a conversation. There's reciprocity. I'm looking at you, I finish, then you say something, then thoughts come. Our teens need that too. I mean, you know, they're human most of the times. But when this sort of interaction can become prickly or it becomes a power play, it sort of feels like hugging a porcupine, doesn't it? There's a great set of talks I encourage you guys to look at. It's by this guy called John Lund. I'll send you all of the resources. Don't take any of it down now. He talks about raising teens as being able to hug a teen porcupine. The prickly situations that tend to happen. And maybe most of your kids, you don't have prickly situations. But if they've not happened, they're coming. But if you surpass them, share your wisdom. Pass it forward. Okay? So, anything else that you want to add before I go to the 3 core values? Anything? Yeah.
I would say timing is also important too. Like you can have that conversation, you know, in the moment, but chances are tempers are running high, people aren't ready to listen. I found, at least from my personal experience, like later that night, or like, you know, once everybody's in a better place, you know, like just actually having, because not only then are they more likely to be receptive, you're also more likely to be receptive as well too.
So that's a brilliant point, because one of the interventions that is very hard for most of us is to say, listen, it's sort of a pressure cooker situation right now, but when you look at being a conscious and a mindful parent, the one core pillar is that you tune in. When dad, you're telling Ishani, listen, I don't want you to face the consequences or make the mistakes that, you know, or learn the hard way. What's coming up for you? What's coming up for you when your daughter is like, you know, flaking off and not doing her thing to get to school? If we don't tune into who we are as people, how stressed we are, how busy we are, how available emotionally we are, and actually what kind of people we are in the parenting relationship, you're always going to come to the table to think of fixing your kid. Your kid doesn't need fixing. They need structure. They need relationship. And they need love, which is there. But how you demonstrate it needs to begin with you first tuning into who you are. Are you more crabby in the morning? Are you better in the evening? Would it help to like cut out 2 activities over the weekend so you just chill with your kid, even if they don't want to chill with you? Are you willing to do that? But that requires sort of this core pillar to be in place. And what that really includes, which sometimes can feel alien to us, is to just be. What does that mean? When I say just being, what does that mean? What do you think that means?
Playing a board game, chilling out, doing something fun.
Being is just being.
Not
That's
But
doing.
with a kid though, with your kids.
Not doing anything.
Not
You can have
doing
some interaction now.
Well,
I think-
yeah, let's think about it.
Maybe interacting without like a motive in mind, just naturally being with each other.
Sure.
Go for a walk, just talk.
No judgment on the dinner
That's all
table.
they know.
That's our new thing.
If they decide to eat with both hands, it's okay.
That's
As long as they eat their meal and don't look like a barbarian, it's fine.
That's our rule.
Anything that allows you to just be with the child in a naturally occurring environment. So that means no media, no enforced activity, no intention to perform, be the best. You're going for a swim, you got to be the best. You're just going for this, you're just going to a swim, you're just going to fool around in the water. That is being. Yes, it is oriented around an activity, but it is just being. It's very hard for most of us to be. But when you be, and when you just are, and you're curious, and you're fun, and you're playing, your teenager might not even talk to you for the whole day, but they need you most, even when you're not doing anything with them, or for them, or protecting them, or controlling them. Just being is worth practicing. So there are some wonderful books on being a conscious parent and being a mindful parent, but it actually just amounts to just sort of chilling with them. Very low maintenance concept.
Do you think
Love,
they kind of,
yeah.
sorry, do you think they kind of sense when you're just being with them, they kind of sense the tension, the stress, the pressure, or anything that the parent goes through?
You know, that question needs to go to them. What do you think?
Wait, what was the question?
You guys are so good, seriously. You're tolerating so much stress. The question was, do young people like yourselves feel that when parents are around you, there is this air of tension, there is an air of stress? Yeah? What do you feel?
It's just different when we're with them.
Yeah? How so?
Like, I don't know, you have to like, I feel like I don't know.
She's looking at mom. She's like, am I going to be okay tonight?
He's not here.
I feel like I have to be like more responsible like around her and like so I don't like get in, like her into like a bad mood. Like I have to be like, you know, like better with my friends.
So you have to put on your game face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad if our kids have to do that.
Well, it's the reality, isn't it? Because it's sort of the culture we're setting as parents, that when you're around, you've got to behave in a certain way, act in a certain way, do a certain way, do more than you should be doing since the last time. So the notion of just being with your kid, whether they're on the iPad or not on the iPad, or you're cooking, or you're doing anything together, even if it is just being in the same room, is priceless. Because how would that change if your parents, Ishani might find it weird because, you know, right? But how would it be if your parents are just sort of around you, but have no agenda? Can you imagine what that would feel like? No. Oh boy, we have a lot of work to do here. We have, I think, only a few minutes. So I just want to go over, I just want to go over logic. What does logic really mean? It's sort of what you were talking about. I don't want my kid to make mistakes that she would pay for. We all learn through consequences, right? You cut a red light, you get a fat ticket. Why are we sparing our teens from that? Something to think about. We can allow them to engage in behaviors that naturally have consequences. They will engage with them anyway. They will test you by going over that 15-minute limit you gave them to go to the shower. So instead, you might as well deal with that, which is why you guys are here today, right? You're here because you want to deal. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
No, I was just thinking, how do you chill with your kids on a daily basis when you have so much to do? And what percentage of time is chilling? Even a 2-minute could be chilling, but they don't want to be chilling with you at that time. It's so difficult to get that time nowadays.
You find windows of opportunity, and you're going to have to look for them. Because if you made yourself very busy, and you've overdone, or you're overdoing, you're going to have to cut out some things. You're going to have to make some decisions.
I'm surprised actually how much they might welcome that.
Yes.
Just it could be just 5-10 minutes.
Even driving to some activity. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to set aside 10 minutes of your time every day. Driving. Turn up the audio.
They don't, yeah. But they don't react well when you take things away like phone or,
And you gotta replace it with something fun and non-judgmental, that's what it is, right? We used to do this thing with our kids, last 5-10 minutes at night, we would just go in their bed and lay down with them. And we would just talk about like, tell us one thing you're grateful for today. And tell us one thing that was really happy today. And we would all share each other's. The first few days it was like, do we have to, I really want to play this game or do something else. And then after a week, they started looking forward to it. They're like, oh, can we do that again? Can we do that again? And I'm a 13-year-old, and I was like amazed at how well they responded to it.
Absolutely.
Nighttime.
You might actually be surprised.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
Yeah. The nighttime is, we do that too, but I'm just trying to see if we can get that gadget thing out in life, because I think that's like killing everyone.
Smita's here to stay, including for
It's here
us.
to stay for sure.
It's a part of their life.
Yeah. It is part of the
Maybe
life.
go and play that game with them, whatever they're playing.
Something like that.
One of the things that I just want to say around that is, I don't know how many of you have family meetings. It's a very Western concept, which Indian family has family meetings. But it's something to think about. Can we all just sit down together? At the dinner table is a perfect opportunity. Most parents who are working, it's hard to sort of coordinate dinner time. But over the weekends, if you can make one meal of the day, a meal where you just spend time, no phones, no media, you cook together ideally. If not, the kids help you fix lunch, fix whatever dinner, and you just sit and talk, and it's going to feel weird. Super weird. But it'll move from feeling weird and like I want to get the hell out of here to, wow, this is not bad. My parents are not weird. My parents are people. I actually like them. I think I can tolerate them. Maybe I could even spend half an hour with them. That transition is a culture shift you're going to have to start to make. So that's something that could be an entry point into creating a ritual of just being. With internet time, you can put it on the family conversation and say, okay, what's going to work for all of us, right? It doesn't work for you that your son wears something twice in a row, but it works for him. So, hey, can we sit down and figure out what works for the both of us? Let me tell you why I think this is important. Why don't you tell me what's so cool about wearing something 2 days in a row? I'd like to work with you to come up to a middle ground. Most people don't like middle grounds because you have to put in work for that. But that's the culture shift you're beginning to create, right? So while I have really talked to you parents, and I know we're out of time, here's the message to teens. This is your ticket out.
Yeah, I have this in my fridge.
It truly is.
Like that?
Do we have time for questions or are we out?
Let's do a few minutes of questions. Yeah.
I do remember he mentioned that he was in a state of confusion, right? Especially when parents are saying something as a teenager, he's thinking of something. More so because he's from a different background.
Well, he's second generation, right?
Yeah.
He's born and brought up here. Well, for the most part, you've sort of been raised here.
So how do you, I have a 13-year-old. Now, middle school is when hormones kick in and a lot of things happening.
Yeah.
And my 13-year-old is more of an athlete. So when you are playing, different sports, you have children from different backgrounds, from different sex. So now it so happens that the children that he hangs out with, they're more of Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are getting into a stage where in middle school there's a lot of, they talk about dare, truth, all those goes on. And the bus, now later part, this is the end of the year on the bus, a lot of things happen. Like kids start raping, they start drinking, and then the conversation goes on where they say, oh, our parents are so busy, they don't even know what's happening in the house. So they start getting a can of beer, they start drinking. So, and for my son, he knows that in our house, that's not allowed because you're still a young child. So, but my husband, he told both my kids, the day you want to drink, you come up to me. I want to have the first drink with you. because I don't want you doing it with your friends, getting into
Correct.
a problem. So he knows that he has a freedom. If he really wants to, he can do it at home, but with the parent, like not hiding. So recently it so happened that he came up and he said, he was hesitating to even talk about this, because he was like, I don't know what my friends are going to think and how they would react to it. And then he came and asked me, he said, this is what is going on in my grade, and the children that I used to hang out with, they've started doing all these things.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hang out with them anymore.
Wow, that's an empowered kid.
So I was like, where does this happen?
Yeah.
So he said it happens when they hang out at home. So he's like, what do you think I should do?
That's the ideal teenager. Oh my God.
So he's like, I don't know, he was testing me, or he really wanted an answer from me. So I was like, what do you think you should do? Because you are the one who's in that situation. It's not
Great
me.
strategy. Never answer a question with an answer. Ask a question instead. It's a great strategy because it sort of gets the ball rolling, right?
To think, right?
Yeah, it gets them to think, yeah.
So then he's like, Mom, did this happen when you were growing up? I said, I really didn't play much of sports, so I did not have to, go through this. But maybe here in this country that is a culture, and I can ask around with other parents if they have been through this. And then immediately he's like, okay, I don't want you telling their parents that this is what they're doing. I said, no, I'm not going to say this to their parents. I said, you can trust me on that. Then he said, okay, now onwards, if they're going to be hanging out at their house, I don't want to go hang out at their place.
Yeah.
But if they're going to be playing outside, I'll go and play. Do you think that is safe enough? I said, fine, if you think you're safe. I said, that's fine. And then I told him, I said, I don't know if I said the right answer or not. I said, anything happens anytime you want me to pick you up, just text me or call me saying, pick me up. I said, no questions asked, I'll pick you up.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is when they're going to their friends' houses, but it so happens that these children also start hanging out downtown on a Friday afternoon because now the weather's getting better.
Right.
So all the action that happens of buying, selling, of the way, the drugs, all that happens in downtown. So he's like, Mom, these kids go and then sometimes they're buying stuff.
Oh, wow.
So what do you think I should
Buying
do?
drugs?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, and actually vaping happens in middle school also. Like the janitors do it. So he's like, the school system knows it, but they don't do anything about it. So I don't know how I can help with that. But he was like, they do buy stuff at that time, and I'm the only Indian child in this group. So sometimes I'm not sure if I should go with them or I should not go with them, but I want to go hang out, have a good time in downtown because all the other children also come. But how do you react to that?
You did great.
Yeah.
Now what do you say to him, like when he says, okay, should I go, should I not go to downtown?
Well, clearly when any kid comes and says, listen, this is the problem. Here are the two sides of the situation. What do I do? It's an open, generous invitation for you to problem solve with them. It's an invitation for you to help them think this through. So those principles of sort of using logic, could include things like, so let's think about this. I'm so glad you came and told me about this, because it sort of conveys the trust we both can have with each other. And I'm always here and I always want to be open to whatever you have to say. If you need to grab me and say, hey, listen, Mom, I need to talk about this, I will always be available. I think that's important to hear because teens want to be able to exercise independence, but they're also not fully there to exercise that independence because some teens know that the costs can be pretty high. So a tough love kind of parent would say, well, you know what, the next time you're tempted, go try it. And we'll deal with the consequences. You may or may not want to say that. But your kid's coming to you and saying, this is the dilemma. When a child presents a dilemma to you, you have done fabulously well. Because the child is enrolling you. They are inviting you to help think this through. That's what you want. You can very well offer the solution and your first gut reaction would be what?
Don't go with them.
Right? Don't do it. Stay away. Don't even talk to those kids, right? That would be the knee-jerk reaction. If you can tune into that, which it sounds like you did, and then you said, but wait a second, somewhere you may have sensed like this is a delicate situation because the kid's confused, questioning, sort of in the direction of not wanting to go, but may get tempted to. Because one of the biggest concerns for teens today is peer pressure. If your friends think you're cool, you're cat's whiskers. If they think you're uncool, boy, it's a hard life you got. So, it's a very valuable interaction. So for example, saying something like, I'm so glad you came to me. Let's think this through. And so look at natural consequences. That's logical. You're not making the kid out to be bad. You're not making out the friends to be bad. You're not making out the waving to be bad, even though you may have judgments about it. You're not making out yourself to be bad. You're dealing with the situation somewhat in a factual way. What would happen if you did go with them? What would happen if you didn't go with them? What might your other friends think? What do you think we might think? How do you think that would make us feel? When you problem solve from a thinking, feeling, and sensation perspective, like what's happening with you sensationally in your body when you're talking to your kid, you can't go wrong because you've heard the child. You've heard how they're feeling, you've heard the confusion, you've heard sort of how they are reacting. So there's no right thing to say. There are some wrong things to say. Like, oh my God, how could you have even entertained the thought? That will be wrong. Because what you have done then is you've shut down the child. The child will not come back to you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a bad voice. So I had a very similar situation. So my kid plays ice hockey. Only kid for years in the team who's Indian. And so this happened, you know, in the same school district, so this is not something new. I think and I agree absolutely that, you know, negotiating and really understanding what the problem is, but also breaking it down, I think helped me in understanding for him what was the worst part of the picture and what was a little bit less than that and less than that, so you can address, for me, you know, the consequences, affordable mistakes and mistakes you can't afford. If you get arrested, you get arrested. You go into juvenile, you know. So, and in our town, people know it. They know where this is happening and how it's happening. So I think understanding and helping him understand the laws and what that means as affordable mistakes and unaffordable mistakes, but also breaking it down for him as to, he did want to be part of the popular kids. He did want to be part of the normal kids. He did want to be, belong to the peer group and not be, I'm different, right? So where do you then help him understand that he is different, because there are some differences in value systems there, maybe, I don't know about the others, but also like negotiating with him, like what exactly is the most problematic for him? Because I know what's problematic for me, but I want to understand from him what's most difficult for you in this scenario. And then, you know, going through the high intensity to the thing. So they have the answers. I mean, he knows, you know, he knows. It's just kind of bringing it out and helping him think through that. Because the moment you get in and tell them what to do, that's it, end of story, not coming back to you again.
You know, one question that I actually really like is having your child answer the question, how is the decision of hanging out with these kids going to affect me? How is it going to affect my life? And, you know, kids, I think 12, maybe even 10 and over, can answer that question. My mom might be mad, you know, I will get into trouble, I will lose friends, I lose credibility in my parents' eyes, come up with a whole bunch of answers. But I think if we can allow ourselves to ask our children, you know, how do you think this decision would affect your life? How do you think it would affect your life if you did go ahead? How do you think it would affect your life if you didn't go ahead? How do you think it would impact you if you wore your sweatshirt twice in a row versus not? And the kid might, you know, roll his eyes and say whatever. But that's a smaller issue than something like this. But that's still a question you might want to play around with. You have been a wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've been a wonderful speaker.
Thank you.
Please join me in this. none of us want to look into those mirrors, right? You showed me the mirror today. I want to thank everyone for being here. You all juggled so